Hello again, my dear students. Today I will be presenting to you another method in solving quadratic equations, and that is completing the square. So this method is a practical way in solving quadratic equations when the first two methods, namely factoring and extracting the square root, could not be applied. But before we proceed to our lesson proper, let us recall that the square of a binomial is equal to a perfect square trinomial, where in symbols, it is x plus or minus y quantity squared equals x squared plus or minus 2xy plus y squared. So notice the relationship of the left side of the equation to the right side of the equation, because later on this relationship is your foundation to effectively solve quadratic equations using completing the square. So why is it that quantity, or let's replace the ink color, why is it that quantity x plus or minus y squared is equal to x squared plus or minus 2xy plus y squared? So let us show this claim on this slide. Why is that? Okay, let us show. You know that when we say squared here, it means that you have to multiply a quantity by itself. So when we say x plus or minus y quantity squared, it means x plus y times x plus y. Let us disregard the minus sign here for the meantime, but later on we will show it. So using your FOIL or FOIL method, first terms x squared, outer terms xy, inner terms another xy, and last terms, that is y squared. So simplifying by combining similar terms, so x squared plus, we have similar terms here, namely xy and another xy. We just have to add their numerical coefficients. So there are two of them, so 2xy plus y squared. And there we are. We have shown that x plus y quantity squared is just the same as the perfect square, x squared plus 2xy plus y squared. How about x minus y quantity squared? We take the minus sign. So the same process, x, no, not plus, minus y times x minus y, which is equal to, by using FOIL method again, first terms x times x, we have x squared here, and outer terms again x times negative y, that's negative xy, and inner terms negative y times x, another negative xy, and last terms negative y times negative y. Remember that when you multiply negative with another negative factor, the result is positive. So that's y squared. So that is x squared minus 2xy plus y squared. And there we are. We have shown the perfect square trinomial equivalent of x minus y quantity squared. So notice the transformation of the perfect square trinomial into a square of binomial. If you have, say, x plus y quantity squared, its transformation into a perfect square trinomial is x squared plus 2xy plus y squared. Now, let's analyze the relationship of these two. As you can see, the first term in our perfect square trinomial is the square of the first term in our binomial. And the last term in our perfect square trinomial is the square of our second term in our binomial here. And the middle term is the product of the two terms in our binomial, namely x and y, multiplied by 2 here. So in short, the square of a binomial is the square of a binomial is the square of the first term, plus twice the product of the first term and the second term let's represent it with st plus square of the second term. Oops, we forgot the minus sign here. It depends upon the operation of the binomial. Now, what if we will do the opposite? We will transform a trinomial, a perfect square trinomial, into a square of binomial. So what if we transform a perfect square trinomial into a square of a binomial? Say m squared plus or minus 2mn plus n squared, that is a perfect square trinomial. Then you just have to take the square root of the first term in our trinomial, that's m squared, so its square root is m, and take the square root of the last term in our trinomial, that is n. Oops, we'll replace our ink with yellow, n, and our operation between the two terms of the binomial could either be plus or minus, depending upon the operation here of the operation here of the second term of our trinomial. So if our second term here is plus, then the operation is plus. If our second term is minus, then we take minus. And of course, do not forget the square here. We change the color, so square. So this is the transformation of perfect square trinomial into a square of a binomial. Okay, now to make sure that you really are dealing with a trinomial perfect square, then here are the conditions that you should satisfy to make sure that you are working with the trinomial perfect square. Number one, the first and third terms are perfect square containing positive numerical coefficients or positive numbers. And number two, the second term should be twice the product of the square roots of the two perfect square terms, the first term and the third terms. And now let's try to do example number one. Transform the perfect square trinomial into a square of binomial. X squared plus 4x plus 4. So does this trinomial really satisfy the conditions of a perfect square trinomial? Let us see. Okay, first, our first terms and last terms or third term are perfect square. Check. Next, our middle term 4x is twice the product of the square root of the first term and the third term. Are they equal? So 2 square root of x squared is x and square root of 4 is 2. So 2x times 2 is 4x. Okay, so check our condition number 2 is satisfied. Our condition number 2, which involves our second term, is the product of twice the square root of the first term and the third term. So therefore, our trinomial is a perfect square. And so we can freely transform it into a square of binomial by just taking the square root of the first term, which is x squared, so that's x, and the square root of the third term, which is 4, so its square root is 2, and the operation of the second term is plus, so just take plus sign, and don't forget to square the binomial, so it becomes square of a binomial. And now let's try another example on transforming the perfect square trinomial into a square of binomial. You have 3m squared minus 6mn plus 3n squared. So it seems like our trinomial does not satisfy our two conditions to have a perfect square trinomial. But as you can see, we can do some kind of simplifications because our first term here and our second term and our third terms share a common factor. What is that common factor of 3m squared, 6mn, and 3n squared? Look at the numerical coefficients. They are all divisible by 3. So we have to factor out 3, and let us see if the remaining factor is a perfect square trinomial. So if we factor out 3, from 3m squared, the remaining factor will become m squared now. From 6m or 6mn, the remaining factor becomes 2mn. And from 3n squared here, the remaining factor becomes n squared. So now, does our trinomial inside the parentheses satisfy our condition? First term and the last term or the third term are positive perfect squares or simply perfect squares. Yes, they are perfect squares. Now, and our second term is the product of the, or twice the product of our square root of first term and square root of the last term. Yes. So therefore, we satisfy the condition of a perfect square trinomial, so we can now transform our PST or perfect square trinomial into a square of binomial. But first, of course, we have factored out 3, and the only remaining factor to be transformed is this, m squared minus 2mn plus n squared. So it becomes square root of m squared is m, the square root of n squared is n, and the operation at the second term is negative here. So the operation of the binomial is also negative. And of course, the exponent here is 2. So that is the equivalent square of a binomial. Now, there are cases in our succeeding lessons where we need to complete the terms of the polynomial to make them a perfect square trinomial. Then we need to transform them into factored form or square of binomial. For example, x squared plus 8x plus blank. So, ano dapat ang ilalagay natin sa blank dito, sa blank na to, para maging perfect square trinomial siya? Napakadali, no? So, sundan nyo lang yung formula na b over 2 quantity squared. Ano yung b? B stands for the numerical coefficient of our middle term here. So, in this case, b is 8. So, we have to replace b with 8, then over 2, then quantity squared. Quantity squared equals 8 over 2 is 4. But 4 squared is 16. So therefore, the last term of our perfect square trinomial is 16. And we have to transform it into a factored form or square of binomial. So from our previous examples, to transform our perfect square trinomial into square of binomial, just take the square root of the first term. So x squared, its square root is x, and the square root of our last term, 16, its square root is 4, and the operation on the second term is plus. So plus 4 squared. So this is now the factored form. Okay, another example. You have x squared plus 7x plus blank. So again, ano yung ilalagay natin sa last part, sa blank? So sundan lang ulit natin si formula na b over 2 quantity squared. So in our next example, or in our example, our b is 7 divided by 2, then quantity squared. So that is 7 over 2. Hindi na pwedeng i-divide kasi pareho silang prime number. Hindi na pwedeng i-divide si 7 kay 2. So ang gawin na lang natin ay i-square natin si numerator at si denominator. So 7 squared is 49 and 2 squared is 4. So lagay lang natin dito, of course, 49 over 4. Now, if we transform this perfect square trinomial into a square of binomial, of course, we have to enclose the terms with parentheses. Take the square root of the first term, so x squared, x. Take the square root of the last term or third term, ito. So 7 over square root of 49 is 7, square root of 4 is 2. And the operation at the middle term here is plus. So plus. So x plus 7 over 2 quantity squared. Okay, let's consider another example before we go to our lesson proper. What if our second term has a numerical or has a fraction as its numerical coefficient, 2/3. So still stick to our formula, 2/3 divided by 2, quantity squared. By simplifying our fraction, complex fraction, then we will have 2/3 divided by 2 becomes 2/6 quantity squared, which is, but 2/6 is 1/3, right? So 1/3 quantity squared, or that is 1/9. So we have to rewrite 1/9. Now if we transform it into the square of binomial, then that is x plus, okay, square root of first term, so that's x. Square root of the last term or third term, which is 1 over, because the square root of 1 is still 1. The square root of 9 is 3 quantity squared. Okay, so that's it. Okay, so I think we are now ready for our lesson proper. Find the roots of x squared minus 8x minus 9 equals 0 by completing the square. So we have to apply what we have learned earlier on perfect square trinomial and square of binomial. But first, we have to rewrite our original equation. So x squared minus 8x minus 9 equals 0. Okay, tapos actually ang pinaka first step natin ay ito. Ihiwalay ninyo si constant term mula sa mga terms na mayroong variables. So syempre, kung ihiwalay ninyo si constant term na negative 9, ang maiwan lang sa left side ng equation ay ito, x squared minus 8x, at yung iiwanan na posisyon ni negative 9 ay isang blank. Yan, dapat ganyan palagi. Aalis si constant term, pupunta siya sa kabila, so magiging positive 9 na siya. And by addition property of equality, kung nag-plus blank ka sa left, dapat mag-plus blank ka rin sa right side of the equation. Then, by completing the, or by filling up this blank here, using the formula, if you recall this again, b over 2 quantity squared, the formula to be used when solving for the last term of a perfect square trinomial, then that is, our b is negative 8 over 2 quantity squared, and this is negative 4 quantity squared. So this is positive 16. So fill up the blanks with positive 16. Now, on the left side of the equation, we have already completed the perfect square trinomial. So we are now ready to transform it into a square of binomial. Again, to transform the perfect square trinomial into a square of binomial, just take the square root of the first term and the square root of the last term, or the third term. So the square root of x squared is x here, and the square root of 16 is 4 here. And the operation at the second term of our PST, or perfect square trinomial, is negative. So just copy the negative operation or minus operation. Then squared is equal to 9 plus 16 on the right side of the equation is 25. And after transforming each terms into a perfect squares, we are now ready to extract the square root of both sides by applying the square root property. So this is the goal of transforming our equation into perfect square trinomial para maka-extract tayo ng square root sa both sides or para magamit natin yung square root property. So extract the square root of x minus 4 quantity squared, cancel each other. So x minus 4 is equal to the square root of 25 is algebraically positive and negative 5. And of course, we have to solve for x of 1 by using positive 5 or plus 5. And 4 should leave x alone. So it has to be transposed again to the other side of the equation. So magiging positive 4 siya. So x of 1 is equal to 9 because 5 plus 4 is 9. Another, when we use negative 5 naman, okay, so meron na tayong x of 1. When we use negative 5 naman, it becomes x of 2 is negative 5. Of course, si 4 is plus 4 pa rin. So you have x of 2 equals negative 5 plus 4 is negative 1. So we have x of 2. We have to check if these really are the solutions of our quadratic equations. Okay, so let's do the checking. Our original equation is x squared minus 8x minus 9 equals you have to write it properly, equals 0. Okay, so let's try the first value of x that we have solved, which is 9. So 9 squared minus 8x, but x is 9 minus 9 is equal to 0. So we have to add a question mark because we are not sure yet. So 81 ang 9 squared minus ang 8 times 9 is 72 minus 9 equals question mark pa rin 0. But 81 minus 72 is 9 minus 9 equals 0. Is it really 0? Yes, because 9 minus 9 is 0, of course. So that's QED. Now, another value of x that we need to substitute is negative 1. So by substituting or replacing x with negative 1, so negative 1 squared minus 8 times negative 1 minus 9 equals 0. But we have to integrate question mark. So negative 1 squared is 1. But negative 8 times negative 1 is positive 8. Minus 9 equals 0. But 1 plus 8 is 9. So 9 minus 9 is 0. So that's 0. We forgot question mark. And that's QED. Therefore, our answer is, since ang tinatanong ay roots, kaya dapat ang answer natin, the roots are, of course, pag isinusulat natin yung roots, mauna yung smaller, sunod yung bigger number or bigger root. So the roots are negative 1 and 9. Oops, dapat and ito, And yun. Another example. Solve 3x squared minus 4x plus 1 equals 0 by completing the square. But as you can see, our equation has a quadratic term which contains a numerical coefficient of greater than 1. So how will we deal with that? So we'll just have to rewrite the equation. Okay, ganito. Pag mayroong numerical coefficient ang ating quadratic term na greater than 1, kaya nito, 3. So, ang gawin lang natin ay eliminate muna natin yung numerical coefficient na yan. At dapat may transform natin siya sa 1. So, paano? I-divide natin lahat sa kung ano man yung numerical coefficient na yan. In this case, 3. So, i-divide natin yung buong equation sa 3. Yan. 3. So, i-divide din natin ito sa 3. So, magiging 3 times 3 is 1 na siya. So, it becomes x squared minus 4 third x plus 1 third equals 0 divided by 3 is 0. So, ganyan. Dapat ang numerical coefficient palagi ng ating quadratic term is 1 kapag ginagamitan natin ng completing the square. Dapat 1 palagi ito. But we may not write it. So, burahin ko na muna. Ayan. Next step. So, we can apply now our first step by separating the constant term to the right side of the equation. So we have now x squared minus 4 third x plus, of course, blank na siya, equals si 1 third na dating positive ay magiging negative. Of course, kasi addition property of equality, dapat may plus blank din dyan sa kanan. Okay, now, hanapin natin kung ano yung nandito sa last term ng perfect square trinomial na yan. So, again, apply natin yung formula na b over 2 quantity squared. So, ano bang b natin dito kanina? That's negative 4 third. Negative 4 third divided by 2, then quantity squared. Okay, tuloy natin dito. So, by simplifying the complex fraction, we have negative 4 third divided by 2. That will be negative 4 divided by 3 times 2. No? So, that's 6 quantity squared. But we can reduce this negative 4/6 into its lowest term because the numerator and the denominator can both be divided by 2. So divide all the parts by 2. So that's 4 divided by 2 is negative 2 and 6 divided by 2 is 3. Of course, andyan pa rin yung square and we can raise or we can square now. Negative 2 squared positive 4 over 9. So, yan ang ilalagay natin dito sa blank. So, that's 4 ninth and 4 ninth naman dito. Okay? Now, so, obviously, our left side of the equation, this one is already a perfect square trinomial. So we can transform now into a square of binomial. So yan, square of binomial. Square root of x squared, our first term here is x. So x, and square root of our last term here, this one, is 2/3. And the operation between these two terms is minus, because in the perfect square trinomial, it's minus ang second term natin. Yeah. Then squared, of course, squared equals, okay, para dito naman sa right side of the equation, we cannot immediately add 1/3 or -1/3 and 4/9 because they have unlike denominators. But as you can see, 3 and 9 are 3 share a common or least common multiple with 9. So 3 and 9, ang least common multiple nilang dalawa ay 9. So ang least common denominator ay 9. So if you are not familiar in addition of fractions yet, so go back to some tutorials with additional fractions. 9. Ang LCD niya, or least common denominator. But -1/3 is to be transformed into a new fraction where the denominator is now 9. So 9 divided by 3 here is 3 times 1 here on the numerator. That's 3. But it's negative, so -3. Plus 4/9 to be transformed into a new denominator, which is 9. I think don't need to transform it because it's just the same denominator, still 4/9 pa rin. So we have rewrite again to give way to the right side of the equation to be simplified. So -3 plus 4 here is 1/9. I think we are now ready to extract the square root of both sides. So applying the square root property. Ayun. Okay, nabitin tayo sa space, so ituloy natin dito. So yung expression natin, x minus 2/3 quantity squared equals square root of 1/9. So pwede na natin i-cancel out si square root at si square. You have now x minus 2/3 equals ang square root ng 1 sa numerator dito, of course 1 pa rin. Ang square root ni 9 is 3, but it's plus or minus. Now to solve for x of 1, syempre i-transpose natin si 2/3 sa kabila, tapos gamitin natin si plus 1/3. So plus 1/3 or positive 1/3. We may not write the plus sign anymore. Then si 2/3 transpose sa kabila, so magiging positive 2/3 siya. Yan. And since they have the same denominators, we can immediately add the numerators. In addition of fraction, you can just add the numerators. Pagandahin natin yung to. You can just add the numerators if they have the same denominators. So 1 plus 2 is 3. And you just have to copy the common denominator, which is 3. And therefore, x of 1 is equal to 3 divided by 3 is 1. Okay, so you have now x of 1. How about your x of 2? So you use your negative 1/3. So negative This is equal. Equal. So, negative 1/3 plus 2/3 pa rin. So, x of 2. Again, they have the same denominators, so you can just do the operation or you can just add the numerators. Negative 1 plus 2 is positive 1. Of course, you just have to copy the common denominator, which is 3. Now, we are not sure if these really are the solutions of our quadratic equation. So, we have to substitute them into our original equation. Again, our checking. So our original equation is 3x squared minus minus 4x plus 1 equals 0. By substitution, our first value of x is 1, so 1 squared minus 4. Our second equation, our x pa rin is 1 plus 1. Is it really equal to 0? Yeah. But 1 squared is 3 minus 4 times 1 is 4 plus 1 equals 0. Okay. 3 plus 1 here is 4, but 4 minus 4 here is 0. So 0 equals 0. Okay, so question mark doon, pero QED na dito because 0 is equal to 0. Now, let's try the other value of x, which is positive 1/3. So, again, substitute natin dito sa original equation. 3x squared, but our x is 1/3 naman ngayon, squared or minus 4x, so minus 4 times 1/3. Parang kukulangin na tayo sa space magbura tayo. Dito na lang. Ayun, maluwang. Okay, so 3x squared, 3, but x is 1/3, so replace it with 1/3. Squared minus 4x, again, x is 1/3, plus 1 equals 0. But 1/3 squared is 1 squared, which is 1, and 3 squared is 9. So the denominator, it's 9. Minus 4 times 1/3. So you just have to multiply 4 with the numerator. So that's 4 over 3 plus 1 equals 0. Question mark pa rin. Question mark. Yan. Next, you multiply now. 3 times 1/9 is 3/9 minus 4/3 plus 1 equals 0. But 3/9 when reduced to lowest term is 1/3 minus 4/3 plus 1. As you can see, pare-pareho ng 3 yung denominator sila. Kaya dapat i-transform na natin si 1 sa isang fraction na 3 din ang denominator. So, it's 3 over 3 equals 0. Diba? 3 divided by 3 is 1. Kaya, ang 1 ay pwedeng i-transform sa fraction na pareho ang numerator sa denominator. So, yan. Pinalitan ko lang. Now, by dealing first with the numerators na, because the denominators are common. So, we have 1 here. 1 plus 3 is 4. And 4 minus 4 dito is 0. So, 0 divided by 3 is still 0. So, therefore, 0 is equal to 0. Tama yung checking natin. So, therefore, QED. And since nag-QED, then we can say that x of 1 and x of 2 are the roots of our quadratic equation. So, therefore, the solutions are one-third and 1. Okay, so let's try to solve another example. Find the solution set of 7x squared equals 2x minus 1. So first, we need to rewrite the equation. So 7x squared equals 2x minus 1. But as you can see, the coefficient or numerical coefficient supposed to be of our x squared in our quadratic term is 1. But 7 ang nandito, kaya i-divide natin sa number na mag-eliminate sa 7, which is of course itself, which is 7. Dapat 1 ang numerical coefficient dyan sa quadratic term. No? So, divide na natin sa 7 lahat, kaya x squared na lang ang naiwan dyan equals 2/7 x minus 1 over 7 na. Now, so, i-transpose na natin yung isang term, which is the linear term, ito, doon sa left side of the equation. Si negative 1 over 7, ito, no need to transpose kasi later on, kung itatranspose natin, ibabalik din natin siya sa kanan. Kaya dyan na lang siya. Minus 2/7 x equals, so walang nabago sa kanya, i-rewrite lang natin, negative 1/7. Okay. Ngayon, kailangan nating maghanap ng last term para makumpleto natin yung perfect square trinomial at malagyan natin yung blank dito. Ayan. Para maging perfect square trinomial siya. Now, kung anong ginawa sa kaliwa, of course, gagawin din natin sa kanan, kaya mag-plus blank din tayo. Using our formula to identify the last term of a perfect square trinomial, which is b over 2, then substitution, ang b natin sa expression na nasa kaliwa ng equal sign ay negative 2 over 7 quantity squared, and all over 2 quantity squared. So equals negative 2 over 7 divided by 2 can be simplified as negative 2 over 14 quantity squared. And this is negative 2 over 14 can be simplified as 1 over 7, negative 1 over 7 quantity squared. But negative 1 squared is still 1, and negative or 7 squared is 49. So the term that we're going to put at the last term is of this trinomial is 1 over 49. So 1 over 49. Also 1 over 49 here. Now, since we have completed this perfect square trinomial, we are now free to express it into square of binomial, which is, ikat ko na lang dito, magiging ano siya, x, and syempre minus, dahil minus yung middle term sa panggagalingan niyang perfect square trinomial, over 1 over 7 quantity squared equals, dito naman sa kanan, we cannot immediately add the numerators because they have different denominators. So, ang gagawin muna natin ay hanapin si least common denominator involving 7 and 49 as the denominators. But, of course, ang LCD ay 49. Ngayon, si negative 1 over 7, i-transform natin sa paraan na yung bagong denominator ngayon ay 49. Ito. Kaya 49 divided by 49 here divided by 7 is 7 times negative 1 here. So that's negative 7. Yan. Plus 1. Let's continue here on the next slide. So it was x minus 1 over 7 quantity squared equals negative 7 plus 1 over 49. Okay, now, so we have to simplify the addition of fractions here on the right side of the equation. So, i-rewrite ko lang itong nasa kaliwa, square equals negative, okay, negative 7 plus 1. So, that's negative 6 over 49. So, parang mag-solve tayo ng ano dito, ng square root ng isang negative na number. Now, let's apply the square root property kasi nasa ano na tayo, nasa stage na tayo ng pag-square root doon sa left side and right side of the equation. So, cancel this out now. So, x minus 1 over 7 equals the square root of negative 6 over 49. But, ang isang negative na number ay walang real root. No, walang real root. Therefore, mag-assign tayo ng I to represent imaginary. So, magiging ganito siya. 6I squared. Remember that I squared stands for negative or is equal to negative 1. No? Doon sa na-introduce natin yon doon sa unang video natin, doon sa introduction of quadratic equations or doon sa solving quadratic equations by extracting the square root. Doon, na-introduce natin siya doon. So, over 49. Of course, x minus 1 over 7 is equal to si denominator na 49, meron siyang square root. No? So, that is 7. Tapos, si I squared, meron din siyang square root. That's I. Okay. Pero, positive and negative. Then, maiwan sa loob si 6. So, ganyan yung magiging itsura niya. Therefore, si x of 1 ay magiging, gamitin natin si positive or positive 1 over 7. I-transpose na natin si 1 over 7. Tapos gamitin natin si plus I over 7 square root of 6. Yan. So, meron na tayong x of 1. Next, sa x of 2 naman, sa x of 2, syempre, ganun pa rin. Pag transpose si negative 1 over 7. Tapos, ang gamitin naman natin ay si negative I over 7 square root of 6. So, these are the roots of our quadratic equation. So, we can now express our roots. Since solution set yung tinatanong, okay, the solution set yung expression natin ng answer. So, first, 1 over 7 plus or minus square root or no, plus or minus 1. Oops, ang pangit ng color. So, I over 7 square root of 6. So, this is our answer.